Farage's first 100 days as PM. A speculative chronicle of sovereignty, smoke, and sudden shockwaves, Part 1. The election surprise. The impossible becomes policy. Chapter 1. The shock victory. Day. It began, as these things often do, with a technicality, specifically a glitch, in the vote-counting algorithm in Sunderland. At 2:12 a.m., a damp returning officer leaned toward the microphone and mistakenly announced, "Victory for the English Reclamation Party," a group that didn't officially exist but had, for reasons no one could yet explain, received over 300,000 votes in the region. By the time anyone noticed, the announcement had been shared 2 million times on X, formerly known as Twitter, formerly known as A Good Idea, and the phrase, "Reclaim this," was trending alongside images of Nigel Farage holding a pint and smiling like a man who'd just urinated on the gates of Brussels. At 3:03 a.m., Nigel himself took to the airwaves via a live stream from a Wetherspoons in Clacton. His tie was off, his cheeks were flushed with patriotic enthusiasm or alcohol. It was hard to tell, and he declared, "Well, it seems the people have spoken, and I, rather accidentally I must admit, have become their chosen Prime Minister." Jolly good. What followed over the next 4 hours was a political collapse so complete and absurd that historians would one day refer to it as the Great Electoral Splat. The Conservative Party, having failed to win over the new base of populist voters they had spent the past decade cultivating, found themselves splintered. Half their MPs had defected to Farage's movement after polling suggested they were more likely to keep their seats if they changed party badges mid-campaign. The other half were hiding in various golf clubs around Surrey. Labour, confident they would sweep into power, had made the tactical decision not to engage with Farage directly. This had backfired when the Farage campaign ran a deepfake video of Keir Starmer sipping a latte and nodding solemnly as a European bureaucrat whispered, "Sovereignty is a social construct," in his ear. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats had a surprisingly good night, increasing their seats by 200%. This brought their total from 5 to 15. They celebrated this with quiet wine. But it was the mathematics of chaos that delivered the final blow. Due to outdated boundary maps, spoiled ballots printed with pictures of Paddington Bear, a protest apparently against immigration policy, and a mysterious surge in postal votes from overseas territories that had never previously participated in UK elections. South Georgia Island, for instance, reported 23,000 votes. The balance of power tilted. By dawn, the Electoral Commission, visibly exhausted and possibly sedated, confirmed what no one thought possible. Nigel Farage, without having stood as an MP in a single constituency, had technically secured enough seats to form a majority government. This was due to the hastily formed Reclaim Britain Alliance, a nebulous coalition of anti-woke libertarians, nostalgic monarchists, pub landlords, former UKIP councillors, and one man from Essex, with a very loud parrot who'd been elected on a single-issue ticket to ban metric measurements. When the news was formally announced by the BBC, which would be defunded within the fortnight, panic broke out. Not in the streets, but in the markets, where the pound dropped faster than an intern holding a tray of Farage's pints. In Brussels, Ursula von der Leyen reportedly stared at the news feed, removed her reading glasses, and said, "Oh no, not again." At 9:14 a.m., Farage released a formal statement via the nation's new official communication channel, a WhatsApp voice note forwarded by his cousin. "Look, this is what the people wanted. We're taking Britain back, again, properly this time. No more faffing about. There'll be new rules, new priorities, and yes, more pubs, fewer problems. Let's get back to being a country that laughs, drinks, and wins wars. By midday, Buckingham Palace released a brief statement congratulating the new Prime Minister-designate, along with a coded clarification that the King had not yet been briefed on any plans for statue redesigns, anthem revisions, or televised pub quizzes from the throne room. Constitutional experts were briefly wheeled out to argue that Farage couldn't become PM without winning a seat in Parliament. This lasted until he released his second voice note, explaining he would be swearing in as a Lord of the Realm for efficiency purposes, having been granted a hereditary peerage by the Duke of Sandwich in a ceremony conducted at a motorway services off the A12. The civil service, stunned but obedient, began assembling a transition team comprised of retired fishing boat captains, political YouTubers, and a former Brexit Party intern named Daz, whose sole qualification was once debated a Remainer and won. By nightfall, Big Ben was lit up in purple and gold, and Nigel Farage, Prime Minister, by fluke and force of will, addressed the nation from a podium emblazoned with the slogan, "Britain reclaimed again, this time we mean it." His opening words were not a policy statement or a plan. They were, "You lot didn't think I'd do it, did you?" Postscript. In classrooms, future students would be asked to write essays titled, "Was Day One a coup or a clerical error?" The answer inevitably would be both. But for now, the United Kingdom, unmoored from reality, reason, and Brussels, had a new captain at the helm. One who had no map, no compass, and no real intention of reading the manual. The only certainty was this: it was going to be one hell of 100 days. Great, let's begin with the full cinematic expansion of Chapter 2. Pints at Number 10, Day 1, continued. The air in Downing Street was thick with the scent of bacon fat, cigar smoke, and something else that hadn't been allowed in Number 10 for decades: unfiltered triumph. Day 1 had begun not with a cabinet meeting, nor with a press conference or solemn address to the nation. No, Nigel Farage's first official act as Prime Minister was to declare, in a slurred voice picked up by nearby cameras, "Right then, pints before policy, yeah?" It was 8:42 a.m. The door to Number 10 swung open, not to reveal a weary statesman entering the weight of office, but a jubilant Farage, pint in one hand, rasher of bacon in the other, flanked by two aides carrying Union Jack beanbags. A third trailed behind with a small foldable bar emblazoned with the slogan, "Make Britain Bitter Again." The public saw it first via drone footage from a Polish news outlet that had been banned from the British press pool just hours earlier. By midday, the footage was viral across the continent. In Brussels, diplomats stared slack-jawed. In Washington, eyebrows arched. In Woking, a man named Dennis began knitting a Nigel-themed tea cozy for the resistance. Inside Number 10, chaos had taken up residence and been handed a coaster. The Prime Minister had ordered every framed portrait of former leaders removed and replaced with proper Brexit art. Gone was Thatcher's steel-eyed gaze. In her place, a 36-inch canvas of a bulldog riding a tank across the white cliffs of Dover, with a pint balanced improbably on the barrel. A few aides nervously commented that it was a bit much. They were promptly reassigned to the Department of Fish Repatriation. By 10:15 a.m., Nigel had declared the start of an emergency cabinet get-to-know-you session. It took place in the newly refurbished Number 10 Games Room, a former strategy suite now painted pub green and fitted with dartboards, bar stools, and an old jukebox stuck on a loop of Vera Lynn and the Jam. The cabinet assembled, or more accurately, stumbled in. Many had never been elected to anything prior to yesterday. One was an Instagram butcher from Essex, known for rants against avocados. Another was a lorry driver turned Minister for Sovereign Roads. The only woman present, a former pub landlord who went by Big Sal, had been appointed Minister for Culture, Sport, and Anti-Soy Campaigns. Farage stood at the bar, pint held high. "Ladies and gents," he announced, "this isn't politics as usual. This is Britain unchained. No more Brussels diktats, no more tofu tyrannies, no more bloody metric nonsense. I want imperial pints, imperial pride, and by God, imperial bacon." They cheered, or at least most did. One junior advisor raised a hand and muttered, "Should we be, getting to the Brexit strategy update?" Silence. Farage sipped his pint, then grinned. "The strategy, my good man, is vibes. Glorious, glorious vibes." Laughter. Nervous applause. The advisor disappeared sometime after lunch. No one asked where he went. By noon, deliveries began arriving. Cases of vintage Spitfire ale. Boxes labeled confiscated EU wine to be burned. A taxidermied fox wearing a bowler hat. A Brexit commemorative jigsaw puzzle. 1,000 pieces, 0 foreign borders. The new Minister for Education mistook the jigsaw for the new school curriculum and took it seriously. Farage demanded bacon sandwiches for all staff, including security. A vegan security guard politely declined. He was sent to monitor the car park until further notice. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement. Inside, Farage was already 3 pints in and crafting a declaration of Day 1 national morale victory. He drafted it on a napkin. Official communique: Britain is back. Beers are back. Banter is back. We are no longer a nation of sorries. We are a nation of sausages. From this day forth, any and all decisions made by this government will be made under the influence of love for this great country and at least 2 pints. Possibly 3, depending on the weather. He signed it with a fountain pen, nicked from the Churchill war rooms. At 3 p.m., a surprise call came from Buckingham Palace. It was not the king. It was an assistant to an assistant requesting that someone please stop sending bacon hampers. Farage insisted on taking the call personally. He delivered a 12-minute impromptu speech about the monarchy's duty to loosen up. When the call ended, he clapped his hands and yelled, "Right then, time for Brexit bingo." Each square on the bingo sheet bore phrases such as "Remonas," "Straight bananas," "Churchill would be proud," and "We won." The winner received a signed copy of Farage's old EU speech, laminated and mounted on a dartboard. The press finally got their statement at 5:15 p.m. when Farage emerged from number 10 in a Union Jack waistcoat, flanked by a kilted bagpiper and someone in a Boris Johnson mask. His speech was short. Today, Britain was reborn. I've consulted with the finest minds in the pub. This isn't the end of democracy. This is what democracy looks like: happier, drunker, and marginally more sunburned. Cheers! He raised his pint. Cameras clicked. The sun dipped below the rooftops. Somewhere, a Nigel impersonator in Blackpool fainted from joy. Inside number 10, the final act of the day, was the unveiling of a new official motto above the entrance. In gold calligraphy, it read, "Keep calm and pint on." The font was Comic Sans. Deliberately. Britain was no longer merely post-Brexit. It was post-satire. Chapter 3. The New Cabinet. Mostly Mates Day 2. The official announcement was scheduled for 9 a.m., but by 8:17, several names had already leaked via a paper napkin left in a kebab shop near Westminster. A junior staffer had written down the first draft of the Prime Minister's new cabinet appointments during a post-celebration takeaway run and accidentally left the grease-splotched document next to the chili sauce pumps. It was titled, People What Get Things Done, Cabinet 2.0 underlined. Twice. In biro. By 9 o'clock, the press had gathered in front of number 10 again, jostling for quotes, pictures, and above all, confirmation. Confirmation that the country was indeed now being governed by a team cobbled together in a single night by a man who believed beer mats were a legitimate form of policy development. Nigel Farage stepped out onto the stoop, nursing what appeared to be a mild hangover and an energy drink labeled Brex Boost, now with more bullion. He was flanked by a man in cargo shorts and a woman wearing a sequined Union Jack blazer. The man waved enthusiastically. The woman saluted in the general direction of the Pret across the road. Farage cleared his throat and addressed the nation. I know what you're all wondering. Who's going to help me run this fine island into its golden age? Who are the patriots with enough backbone to slap common sense back into Whitehall? Well, I'll tell you who. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his back pocket and read aloud what would become one of the most notorious cabinet lineups in British history. The Cabinet of National Reclamation, as announced by Farage, in between sips of gin and chuckles, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Big Terry, a former butcher from Kent and long-time darts champion. Terry had no formal economic training, but Farage praised his ability to run a tight ledger and spot a dodgy sausage from 50 paces. Terry's fiscal plan reportedly involved converting the Bank of England's reserves into real assets, starting with pork belly futures. Home Secretary Sharon Wrigley, pub landlady, and self-declared defender of the realm against nonsense. Her primary qualifications were banning 3 separate patrons for wearing French cologne and once physically removing a vegan protester with a mop. Her new immigration policy would be known simply as the door policy. Foreign Secretary Gary Gaza Merton, former Ryanair baggage handler and semi-professional cage fighter, known for a 6-minute viral rant against French toll roads. Fluent in exactly one language, English badly, Gaza's diplomatic strategy involved turning up late, arms folded, and not backing down. Minister for Education, Melinda Pluckett, who once taught a traditional values workshop at a summer fete. No formal teaching degree, but several YouTube lectures under her belt, including one titled, Shakespeare Would Have Voted Leave. Defense Secretary, Colonel Blimpington, a reenactor who legally changed his name, rank, and title after spending 22 years in a fantasy Napoleonic regiment. Technically never served in the actual military, but once defended a village green from a rogue goat. Health Secretary Craig, the lad Jenkins, former club promoter turned wellness guru. His primary strategy, reduce NHS wait times by replacing GPs with self-diagnosis apps and motivational leaflets. Minister for Culture and AMP, Heritage, Lady Doreen Catamole, a retired pantomime actress best known for playing the rear half of a horse in Dick Whittington. Passionate advocate for restoring traditional British values like afternoon tea, mild xenophobia, and 3-hour Sunday naps. Minister for Transport, Derek, the Satnav Jones, lorry driver turned TikTok philosopher, believes modern infrastructure is a trap and proposes converting HS2 into a national go-kart track. Minister for Climate Realism, Bazza Fudge, owner of a vape shop in Peterborough and self-declared enemy of windmills. Climate change, he argued, was mostly weather and woke hysteria. Minister for Beer, Bacon and Amp, Brexit memorabilia, newly created post. Held by Farage himself. When questioned about the conspicuous lack of prior political experience among his ministers, Farage shrugged. What Britain needs right now is not more Oxbridge lawyers and Twitter eggheads. What it needs is guts, instinct, and people who've cleaned a pub toilet at 2 a.m. on a bank holiday. The room fell silent for a beat. Then, the Mail Online declared it a working-class revolution. The Guardian called it a front-row seat at the collapse of empire. And Nigel, ever the showman, clinked glasses with Gaza and shouted, "Let's get cracking, team." In private, senior civil servants were said to be evaluating their options, which was code for Googling Canadian citizenship. An anonymous Treasury insider described the situation as improvised chaos with the terrifying rhythm of confidence. Another simply left a note on their desk reading, "Gone fishin' for sense." Meanwhile, Terry the Butcher, now Chancellor of the Exchequer, had already requested the office be redecorated with red tiles and a meat hook. "Helps me think," he explained. Later that evening, Sharon, the Home Secretary, was caught on a hot mic, saying, "Well, if we can't run the country, at least we can run it into the ground with a laugh." No one contradicted her. Postscript. This cabinet would go on to set records for most policies announced via pub chalkboard, most resignations mid-pint, and most appearances in front of parliamentary committees beginning with the phrase, "Well, what had happened was..." It also gave rise to a new term in the Oxford English Dictionary, faragerie d'art, the act of appointing friends, eccentrics, and loud acquaintances to positions of immense responsibility on the basis of banter and blind optimism. As day 2 closed, Britain had a new ruling class. Not the elite, not even the competent, just the available.